Chris, was realising that if the original plan had worked and if Kiev had fallen in 2 or 3 days, then we probably would have seen a repeat of Crimea. We would have seen a lot of hand-wringing and pearl-clutching from the West, but there would have been a lot of sitting on hands as well, as you remind us. And so we could now be seeing that question being asked at the other side of the country, of course, but the same question is, what will the West do when he is essentially breaking all international law, but pretending that he isn't, pretending that he is consolidating the Russian Empire when he is in fact invading and stealing sovereign foreign land?
I'm pessimistic, as I said. I don't think the West will do anything. I think they'll just leave it be and complain for many, many years.
It is different from Crimea in the sense of there has now been a long and bloody war, which has captured the imagination of the West and indeed the world at large, and NATO has got skin in the game, for want of a better phrase. So that capitulation is less likely, but far from impossible. I would argue probably more from a position of optimism than realism.
Do you think so, yeah?
Yeah, well, I hope so. That's why I said optimism, not realism, Chris.
And my other pessimistic thought is, we had these comparisons with Afghanistan and the women complaining about all the sons and grandsons being killed. I think it's a different age now. The technology of repression, which has been developed by the Chinese and the Russians in the last 20 years, is streets ahead of what was around in 1989.
Okay.
I was here in East Germany in 89 and saw what happened, and it was pretty rough.
Yes.
But the things you can do nowadays with technology and the weapons they've got and the way they can just manage to just take out people with face recognition and so on. There's never going to be any demonstrations. There's never going to be another
meaningful demonstrations. I don't know about that. I bow to your greater knowledge, and I can only address your pessimism with optimism. Although you're the one with the facts at your fingertips, so I don't think I'd win that encounter. Thank you, Chris. Very, very helpful, and bringing us back to that really crucial pivot, I think, which is grim. It is bleak. It is pessimistic, but. It's important to look at the language that Putin has used, talking of existential threats, and moving from that position to if territorial integrity is threatened. So just think for a minute about that, what that means with the benefit of Chris's commentary and other callers. He's not talking about an existential threat. He's talking about territorial integrity. And the referendums are designed to redefine what the territory is. So the territorial integrity of Russia currently ends at the Russian border. By the time these referendums are over, the territorial integrity of Russia will end wherever he wants them to end. Will end on the extremities of these regions. And that means that Ukrainian advances into those regions, which is obviously what underpins all of this, that is what he is terrified about, continuing Ukrainian advances into these regions, retaking territory, possibly even taking territory that was lost in 2014, would become an invasion of Russia or an infringement of Russia's territorial integrity under the false reality that Putin has constructed with bogus referendums. But that makes the presence of Western weapons in Ukrainian hands on Russian territory the crucial question, which is where Chris in Leipzig's pessimism comes from, because once that is in the mix, it's hard not to think that it would be a kind of cessation and a reflection, a repetition of what's gone on in Crimea. 11:47 is the time. It is 10 to 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on at LBC. I think possibly, and it's maybe for my benefit as much as yours, a bit of a corrective, not a corrective, a counter to Chris's self-confessed pessimism a moment ago. Dmitry Alperovich is one of the people I've been following on Twitter since this started, specialises in national security, geopolitics. I don't know his full background, but I found his analysis incredibly helpful and frequently bang on the money. So this is what he had to say a few hours ago. Putin has responded, and this is context. Putin has responded to the humiliating and shocking to the system Russian military defeat in Kharkiv Oblast. His choices were A, do nothing, B, try to negotiate, C, escalate. Right? That makes sense. He chose to escalate and proclaim an explicit goal of liberating Donbass, which is a tall order. Okay. So in doing so, he has painted himself into a corner and potentially put his rule under threat. This is what I mean by the counter to Chris in Leipzig's pessimism. If he fails in achieving his stated goal of conquering Donbass. And, Dmitry Alperovich continues, he is making his long-term political situation even worse by moving forward with annexation referendums in oblasts that are not even fully under his control, or where his area of control is diminishing daily. And he concludes the one thing that no Russian leader can afford to do, as Gorbachev, Khrushchev and Nicholas II, long before them, have painfully discovered, is to appear weak. That can be very hazardous to health and limit longevity in power. Putin has now potentially put himself on that same path. So a different reading of the same situation from a very seasoned Russia watcher. Sam's in Enfield. Sam, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I recall, James, Emmanuel Macron said that we mustn't humiliate Putin. We must give him some kind of wriggle room to essentially, step backwards.
I remember.
And I think we are in danger of not giving him that wriggle room space to take a step back.
Well, I think the response at the time and the response now would be you don't give wriggle room to tyrannical invaders.
Of course, James, but we all know that wars end around the table with negotiated settlements and compromise on both sides.
No. Wars can end in bunkers.
They can end in bunkers, but this one will end with parties coming around the table when they think
that's an opinion. Whereas previously you were. I'm not picking a fight. You're just not right. Wars can end when a tyrannical invader is toppled by his own people.
Right.
Which is the scenario that was being cited by Dmitry Alperovich in that Twitter thread that I just read out. That's why talking about appearing weak being a potentially fatal position for a Russian leader to find themselves in. So neither of us can win. This isn't an argument. I think I'm doing is...
I agree with you.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But
I'm leavening your words.
Yeah, but remember the situation here is this is not a cornered polecat.
No.
This is more of a cornered lion.
Yes, of course.
He's got the nuclear weapons. He's got hypersonic missiles, which travel at Mach 5, and he will escalate if he thinks his position is teetering on losing power. This guy is. I think it's not within his psyche to actually back down.
I think you're right, but it's an escalation. It's an escalation with less effective troops and ordnance than he started the war with.
You're right, James, but I don't think he's talking about troops. I think he's talking about hypersonic, long-range missiles, tactical nuclear weapons. He's saber-rattling.
Well, he's talking about all means at our disposal, so you can have whatever you want from that list, can't you?
So that message, I think it's actually for two parties, isn't it? It's to the West to say, don't push me so far because, I will retaliate. And it's also back at the Kremlin. Yeah, and it's also back at the Kremlin to say, don't think about toppling me because, I'm kind of, he's probably at his most dangerous. And I think one of your callers said it's all about these unintended consequences that we have to really worry about.
Yes.
And for me, I think this is now quite a good time to actually go to Putin and say, your time's up. Let's have some kind of face-saving mechanism for you to back down. And let's call this thing over right now because you're going to lose and you're going to lose in a big way.
And as you know, some people call that appeasement.
Yeah, some people call it appeasement, but, I think...
But you're correct to remind us that many conflicts do end like that over the years, and we sometimes perhaps emphasise the relevance of the Second World War because it hangs over the Western world so completely that it becomes almost an unchallengeable model of how wars are fought and finished. But it's not, of course, anything of the sort. Sam, I'm cracking on just so I can squeeze in one more call. It's the only reason, and that call will be James, who's in Edgware. James, what would you like to say?
Hi, my background is in current affairs journalism. I worked for a good few years in Channel 4 Dispatches, BBC Panorama, etc. like that.
Okay.
I now work for a think tank. I'm not going to mention the think tank for the reason, and you'll understand why in a minute.
Okay.
I'm a senior researcher for them. I write stuff for them. And I think that I'm as pessimistic as many of your callers. I think that there's a lot of there's fakery, really. There's fakery in what we are doing. We are all pontificating. People like me, we write articles, we pontificate on what's going on in the world. We pretend we know what Putin's going to do. And really, none of us do. None of us do. And we're all just sort of like hoping that our predictions come true. Now, like you...
Are you having, and I say this with great warmth, are you having a form of career crisis here, James, live on the radio?
Well, to an extent, but I suppose it's more than that. I mean, if you look at, I've met numerous people throughout my career,
yes.
People like who were in the intelligence services, etc., and now in the lecture circuit. And for years, they predicted the full. And I'm talking about the chemical weapons and dodgy.
Yes.
Let's look at, say, Saddam Hussein. For years, the CIA tried to topple Saddam Hussein and thought that they could do it, and got psychologists to look into his mind, etc. This is all in the public record, and they failed.
Yes.
Okay, they failed. And even Kim, who that independent journalist, who I've got a lot of respect for. He knows what's going on the ground because he reports on the ground, but reporting what's going on the ground doesn't really give him any insight into Putin's mind, okay? Because he doesn't know Putin.
No,
Probably has never met Putin.
But studying Putin's behaviour over decades gives you some... I don't think anyone can argue with what you're saying. No one's claiming clairvoyant capabilities or mind-reading skills, but you do have, I mean, you know what Kremlinology is. You don't need me to tell you. You do learn something.
Kremlinology got it wrong for years. We thought that nobody predicted the Cold War was going to fall. Nobody predicted the Cold War was going to
But I'm sure there are things that have been correctly predicted to put on the other side of the scales.
But that's my point.
I know it is. We're crossing our fingers. So there's no point me asking you what you think about this morning's events then.
Well, what I would say is that what I'll say is the consensus,
with the caveat of all that's gone before.
Yeah, the consensus is that he won't launch a nuclear weapon in Ukraine because only a madman would, and it's a cliche to say he's mad. He's probably rational. It's a cliche to compare him to Hitler. But just as 9/11 took us by surprise, okay, and the fall of the Cold War took us by surprise, there is a chance that he launches a nuclear weapon, and we're like, I didn't see that coming.
We don't see it coming until it's there.
Exactly, and that is my concern, that the industry that I am part of, and with respect you're part of, we're kind of BS. We're kind of faking it.
That's where I dispute it. I think because that would involve consciousness, and it's not a conscious BSing. I would psychologically describe it as denial as a defense mechanism. We're all in danger of believing what we want to believe, and it's obviously a lot more palatable to believe that he would never ever launch a nuclear weapon than to believe that he would. And so if you begin with that psychological stroke emotional foundation stone, then inevitably consensus heads towards what you've just described. But the facts, as you've explained rather well, don't necessarily support where emotion and psychology takes us.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, without continuing my crisis on air, as I said, I was in current affairs for 20 years, and then I moved into the think tank, and I'm not going to mention the think tank for obvious reasons.
No, clearly.
And now I'm a senior researcher at the think tank. Now, I have no idea how I landed that. Okay,
Stop it. Seriously. Your kids need shoes. Stop it.
Are my articles? I hope they're worth something.
Right.
I hope that they.
But you wouldn't want anybody to think you were laying claim to anything definitive ever.
Well, I'm faking it until I make it.
I don't like that. I mean, I hope that I'm sure that your pontifications are built upon consideration and contemplation and observation. But yeah, all right. I mean, it's a very, very interesting and not unamusing point at which to end that conversation. And I have, for the first time ever, allowed someone not to disclose what think tank they work for, because it would be one of the most real-time resignation letters that the world has ever seen, I think. James, take care. I hope we can talk again. And I genuinely hope that you feel a little less negative and pessimistic about your own professional efforts in the morning, because I'm sure it's not quite as bad as you portray. It's 12:01. All right. I've got to be very careful now. I was about to do an enormous everyday sexism, but we haven't had a single call. Have we had a single call off a woman today? We haven't, have we? Now, this is psychologically fascinating, because they have been topics about which you probably knew just as much. Trickle-down economics and Vladimir Putin's speech this morning. But there is this is what I mean about being careful not to be accidentally sexist or casually sexist. It would be male privilege kicking in, wouldn't it? It's weird, but I think it is psychologically explainable. Women are generally not as, I don't want to say puffed up with their own importance, but they're a lot more prone to self-doubt or thinking they're not worthy to contribute to a conversation. And it always saddens me. Normally I call it out, but I missed it today. It just washed by me, I'm afraid. And the everyday sexism I was about to do was to say, I bet we get a lot of female callers now, because we're about to do a very soft, I think it's a very soft subject. A very silly subject even, but it is on the front page of the Sun newspaper, which may not be the best-selling newspaper in the country anymore, but it is still a significant one, and it features a story that also gets a mention on the front pages of, lots of other newspapers as well. Well, the cheaper prints, as no one else calls them anymore. It's the front page of the Daily Star as well, which is a very, very amusing read these days. The Daily Mirror puts it on the front page, but not as the main front page story. And the Daily Express similarly has it on the front page, but not as the front page story. Can you guess what I'm talking about? Daily Star headline might give you a clue or a cue. Q do you think you are? Q do you think you are? Q jump Holly fights to keep job. Holly and Phil distraught at royal Q jump row, and Holly and Phil devastated over Queen Q row. There is a selection of some of the front pages catching your attention this morning. None of them as terrifying as the Daily Mail's, which says freedom begins with tax cuts. I mean, that's straight out of George Orwell, isn't it? Freedom begins with tax cuts. And their effortless segue from telling you that Boris Johnson was by far the best thing since sliced bread to pretending that Liz Truss's seems almost to be complete. So, I don't know whether or not this matters. I don't think I just veered. Give me a break, ladies. I don't think I just veered into everyday sexism. Vicky says, it's okay, James. I enjoy the mansplaining. Look, I'm a man and I was explaining something. That's not the same as mansplaining. Roz says, wow, you are digging a hole for yourself. Roz is in Potter's Bar. And Julian Suffolk puts it best. This is what I was seeking to describe about. Let's say it's a characteristic I come across more often in men than in women. And it is best distilled in this lovely phrase: let me interrupt your expertise with my confidence. And Patrina has complained that we might not have had female callers, but I have actually texted quite a few times. That's from Patrina, who is in East Preston. So we're going to fix it now. Well, sort of. So Holly Willoughby and Phil Schofield present a morning television programme on ITV. Is it on when I'm on? It's on. It must be on when I'm on, isn't it? Because Susanna's on before me. So it comes on after Lorraine, I imagine, and is a bit like Richard and Judy. It's in the slot that Richard and Judy used to occupy when we were kids. And this morning it's called. Well done. Thank you, Keith. That's why we pay him the big bucks. And I've been on this slot on this radio station for so long that you can't look at me as if I'm stupid. I don't know what's on Keith just said he sits here watching it every morning while supposedly outputting this programme. You know, I wouldn't be surprised. And they got photographed in a sort of special line. You know all those people who queued up for 12 or 14? Did Ian Payne ever get to see the Queen lying in state? Did he ever get to the front of it? He gave up, did he? I knew. After 4 hours, what a snowflake. Oh, Paney. At least he had those chicken sandwiches. Listen, if you weren't listening to the programme on Friday, not a lot of this is going to make a lot of sense to you. But then again, it's a reminder of why you should never miss this programme. You miss out on some of the in-jokes that follow occasionally too. And also, as well, could female listeners stop telling me that they've been texting me all morning? I mean, I care, but it is not a counter to the fact that we haven't taken a single call from a female caller yet. So Holly Willoughby and Phil Schofield present This Morning, that well-known television programme on ITV that back in the day was, of course, presented by Richard and Judy. And they went to Westminster to see the Queen. It sounds like the beginning of a nursery rhyme, doesn't it? And they were photographed. Somebody noticed. I wonder how it started. Does anyone know how it started? Because it was only on the live feed, I believe, that it got spotted. And after it was spotted, everything went a little bit strange. The claims were that they were too posh to queue in Westminster Hall last Friday. And it has upset these presenters enough for their employers to intervene. That kind of thing rarely happens unless the presenters have demanded it. There is a petition, but then again, there's always a petition. There's always a petition that had 21,000 signatures calling upon them to resign. And then the claim that they were actually there for work and had special sort of journalistic dispensations to go past the coffin has been challenged in some quarters, culminating in claims this morning. And this kind of showbiz journalism, I can tell you because I used to do it, is often a hell of a lot of smoke and mirrors, an awful lot of noise signifying nothing. But there are claims that Holly Willoughby in particular is so upset by the coverage and by the failure, as she sees it, of ITV to clarify the situation and put out a statement that she is even considering her future. I don't know about that bit, and I don't particularly care, forgive me. But that's not the point of the conversation we're going to be having today. The conversation we're going to be having today is, and anyone just tuning in, save your criticisms for this little foray into the shallow end, all right? We've done trickle-down economics and the geopolitical situation in Ukraine this morning. If I can't take an hour in the shallow end, then frankly, I mean, I never can. I never will. I enjoy the shallow end, sometimes as much as the deep end, sometimes more. So there is a fair degree of fury, enough fury to see this story occupying front pages of the country's most popular prints, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, 4 or 5 days after it actually happened. And it's a juxtaposition of what they did with what David Beckham did. David Beckham did the full queue. Susanna Reid and her mum did the full queue. So if there is journalistic dispensation available, Susanna could have availed herself of it, no doubt, but I doubt she could have got one for her mum. I don't know. MPs were allowed to nominate people who could go through, I think. But here's the thing, all right? And I'll open up the phone lines in just, well, they're open now, actually, if you want to get in early, but I haven't quite finessed the question yet. Because here's the thing that I found absolutely ridiculous about this entire story, and I still do, but I think it's possible I'm reading it wrong. It was a queen, a monarch, a head of state who was lying in state in Westminster Hall. The most powerful embodiment imaginable of hierarchy and privilege. The most IVIP you could ever hope to encounter. The Queen of England. VIPs don't come more I than she. So the idea that was somehow an inappropriate place for VIP status to be afforded to people just strikes me, without getting political or Republican or monarchical or royalist about it, it strikes me as hilarious. Just that simple juxtaposition of facts. We are here to pay homage to our late Queen. It's absolutely outrageous that some people have higher status than others. Do you see what you must see, mustn't you? How silly that is. It's disgusting that some people have got higher status than others. I'm here to pay my respects to the late Queen. No? Am I missing something here? Let's get those phone lines up and running. Okay. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. And the question is, are people really cross about this? Are you really cross about this? Why are people cross about this? And what exactly are people cross about? There's 4 questions there. You can answer 1, 2, 3 or 4 of them. You may get a lollipop if you have a crack at all four, but the chances are that by the time we come back from the next junction, I'll have forgotten what they were anyway. It's a general conversation, conflagration, contemplation of this remarkable story that still exercises the tabloid newspapers to a remarkable degree about two television presenters paying their tribute to Her Majesty the Queen without having to queue like everybody else did, apparently as a consequence of their professional endeavours, but equally, quite possibly, a consequence of their VIP status. And if there is no room for VIP status at an event featuring our late Queen, then something, to my mind, at this stage is very odd. And you say, why are they VIPs just because they're on TV? Well, well, they're VIPs because of their careers, not because of their circumstances of birth. Who should be a VIP? Someone born into it, like Andrew Windsor, or someone who's achieved prominence through effort, like David Beckham? Do you see what I mean? So I don't think that's going to work necessarily as an argument. The idea, well, they're not proper VIPs, they're not as important as the Queen because their fame is built upon actual effort and achievement. So there it is, okay? I think the Queen's place in our hearts was built upon effort and achievement, but her VIP status was not. That's the point I'm trying to make. I think I've made it. 0345 6060 973. What exactly are people angry about? And what does it say about our wonderful, wonderful country? 0345 6060 973. 12:19 is the time, and I should add, of course, that if Philip Schofield or Holly Willoughby are listening, then do give us a call on 0345 6060 973, and you can go straight to the front of the queue. Dave's in Croydon. Dave, what would you like to say?
Still laughing at that front of the queue. No, sorry. No, I actually queued up. And sorry, hello, James.
Hello,
sorry, first time caller.
Nice
I do apologise. Great show.
No,
I thought that they'd actually got in through, like an MP got them in. You get can take so many guests in. Yeah. It's only when I heard that they used their media passes that I was a little bit, that's a bit naughty. What it is, I queued up for 14 hours. And there was a lady behind me with mobility issues on a stick who never complained once. And we all got to the front. By the time I got to the front, it was like nearly 2 o'clock in the morning. And in Victoria Gardens, in the Gardens of Westminster, it was like the walking wounded. There was St John's ambulances everywhere. There was people having their, wearing the foil blankets. They were being attended to. And I thought, no, this ain't right.
But this is the system. It wasn't that they sort of went along as civilians and got their press pass out like you can do at museums or something like that. But they were there, according to their employer, they were there as journalists. And the system there is exactly the same that lots of other journalists will have used to report from inside the hall.
Was you there?
No chance. I'm far too junior. I'm no Holly Willoughby, mate.
No, I mean, this is the problem, though. I mean, if that's the truth, I haven't got a problem with that. But this is what I think everyone's questioning.
So you've done it. So you're, I think, allowed to question. You would feel, what's the word? Cheated? Offended? If they pulled a kind of VIP pass?
Personally, it doesn't bother me, but I think about the people in the queue. Old ladies.
But it was a different queue, wasn't it? They go down a sort of VIP lane. This language isn't helping. They go down a sort of different route. It's not that they just slide in to the main queue and push someone behind them. Did you see, while you're here, footage of Johnson and his wife actually being told, as they came into Westminster Abbey, being told to get in line, actually being told to step to one side and wait until Theresa May and David Cameron had gone in first? They were literally pushing in, and they got hauled to one side by the staff in the Abbey.
Well, the lady behind me, I don't know her name, but for me, she was a VIP. Oh. She should have. That's my.
All right.
Okay. I'm soft as anything.
Me too. In fact, you remind me. I must recommend the film in a minute that I was watching last night, feeling very soppy. But I mean, she wouldn't. Her queuing. So you're saying they should have made efforts for people with mobility issues, not people with television programs.
I wouldn't have let Phil and Holly in personally, but there you go.
What have you got against
Johnson, or Theresa May. Corbyn, I've got no problem. Yeah,
It's all coming out now. Yeah. Get it all off your chest, Dave.
This is great therapy. You don't mind if I call you again tomorrow, do you?
I might have to start charging. There you go. Seriously, thank you, Dave. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. I'd missed that. Has anyone else seen it? I'll tweet it. It's from a Philip May parody account. But it is actually, I'm sure there's an explanation for it. It is actually Johnson and his wife coming into the Abbey and being told by attendants that they have to step to one side and wait until David Cameron and Theresa May have gone first. So there must have been an order of precedence for former prime ministers. As if by magic, our political editor Theo Ushwood has wafted into the studio. Did you know that? Did you see that? I think
it was about going in order according to the time you'd served.
Yes. So Cameron, time you served, not when you served, not when you did it.
So Cameron goes first, then it's Theresa May, and then it's Boris Johnson, and he'd gone in first. And therefore, he was stopped by one of the ushers. Did
he lasted longer than Theresa May, didn't he?
Yes, just.
So it's Cameron who's gone in first, then Johnson, then May.
No, Cameron, when they served. So Cameron, then May, then Johnson.
Well, that's order of service, not length of service.
Sorry, I meant that.
That's what I said. Sorry. So you've come in and corrected me with a false. So you're like that bloke from the think tank having a career crisis live on the radio. To what do we owe this pleasure, Theo Ushwood?
Just to bring you a bit of an update, because we understand that the support for businesses when it comes to energy is going to amount to around £60 billion. We still don't have a cost. We're going to get that hopefully tomorrow in the mini budget. They've just put out a written ministerial statement and press release today. And Jacob Rees-Mogg has done an interview with his 6 civil servants, I think.
He's done an interview with himself, really. He's done an interview with an auto queue outside a boarded-up shop. It's kind of quite an image. Cold War Steve's going to be out of a job soon, not just our friend from the think tank.
But he's also done an interview, a broader interview, where he's talked about the support package and the length of time that it lasts. Because, of course, for consumers, you and me, your listeners, the package is in place for 18 months. That's the support. That's the guarantee of the support for 18 months, which basically takes us through to the end of next winter. For businesses, it's only 6 months. But Jacob Rees-Mogg was unable to say whether there would be further support for those businesses at the end of the 6 months, and which businesses, if there was further support, would get it.
Most schools are funded via the taxpayer anyway, so they receive money from central government, the state system. But we are obviously going to have to support. They still pay
their own bills, which is what you're helping today.
But we are going to have to support, and that's what we're announcing today, the state sector as well as the private sector. This is a fundamental increase in costs across the economy. And schools and hospitals and care homes are obviously going to be able to need to afford their energy in a year's time as well as today. I can't announce future schemes. It would be wrong to do so. And we need to make sure that we use this time to find out where the support is needed.
It's the plausibility. What absolute hogwash. Schools receive a finite amount of money from government funding, whether national or local government, and they're going to have to pay bills from that finite amount of money. So they face exactly the same problem that businesses face, or that households face, or that individuals face. And he's talking as if, again, as always with Jacob Rees-Mogg, is he too thick to understand it, or is he being despicably disingenuous?
So what's interesting, because we've just been getting some background, speaking to some people within government who know about these things. And businesses are basically, and this includes schools, it includes hospitals, are being asked to be more flexible than consumers, than you and I are. So the hope is within government that businesses who can get to 6 months down the line and not be reliant on using so much energy. But of course, if you're a hospital, how do you save money? Do you switch off the life support machine for 12 hours a day? Do you close?
Don't give them ideas. Seriously, I'm not joking. But don't let anyone from those weird think tanks hear you suggest things like that. Why do people need? You don't need a life support machine on all day, do you? I just turn it off when the electricity. Put it on economy 7. That's probably not a thing anymore, is it? It's from when I was growing up.
But that's the expectation that some businesses and public service providers, hospitals, schools are going to be asked to be more flexible in 6 months' time to try and find the savings, so that the grant, the support from the government, the subsidy from the government,
it's not great,
doesn't necessarily have to continue right across the board. And that's going to be 60 billion just for 6 months. You want to do that for 18 months, the support goes up to potentially as high as 180 billion on top of the support, of course, for consumers, which is domestic households, which is put at around 150 billion pounds.
I mean, it's not pretty. which is probably why he didn't announce it in the House of Commons, which would normally be what we'd expect.
You would expect something of this size to be announced in the House of Commons.
Why no PMQs today?
So MPs are taking the opportunity now to swear allegiance to the King. We won't now have Prime Minister's questions again in the House of Commons until around, I think it is the 12th of October. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the week after Parliament coming back a little bit early. Yes, it's the 12th of October, a week earlier than it otherwise would have done. So that would be one PMQs in the space of 4 months.
And in normal circumstances, had it gone ahead today with Liz Truss in New York, I wonder how many people off the top of their heads could tell us who would have conducted PMQs today. I know you can. I'm just building up a bit of tension here, a bit of theatre.
Like the kid who could put up their hand in the class.
No, we like that. Eagerness, a bit of Tiggerish enthusiasm. Who would it be today?
It would be Therese Coffey.
Against Angela Rayner.
But we will be hearing from
women than I've managed to get on the programme so far today.
Therese Coffey will be giving a statement, we understand, about support for the NHS, particularly ambulances and A&Es, tomorrow in the House of Commons, and that's we've been told that's going ahead.
Thank you very much indeed, Theo Usherwood, taking us up to the news, which means Philip in Cardiff and Mandy in Bath will be up first after those headlines. Just something to clarify that Theo said. The reason why you can't cite public spending on things like energy bills or even furlough, or indeed the war in Ukraine, which popped up earlier on the programme, in response to somebody pointing out that Liz Truss is in favour of cutting public services, cutting public spending on public services, is very simply because emergency payments to alleviate the energy bill crisis, or emergency payments to alleviate the impact of furlough, or even expenditure on supporting our allies in Ukraine, that is not public service expenditure. It's public spending, but it's not public service expenditure. Popped up earlier in the programme, and I'm not sure I was as clear as I could have been, so I have been now. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines. It is 33 minutes after 12. Paul writes, I can't believe people are making an issue of this morning gate when they could be asking why the FBI have questioned one of Liz Truss's staff. I'm looking forward to the day that it's deputy leaders PMQs. And you're right, this tale of Mark Fulbrook, who is cooperating with the FBI over an investigation into a Conservative Party donor, is, I think, one of those stories that would have resulted in much bigger consequences in what we are going to have to continue referring, even post-Boris Johnson, to as normal times. Liz Truss declined last night to say whether she had been directly told by her Chief of Staff, Mark Fulbrook, that he was cooperating with the FBI over an investigation into a Conservative Party donor. If you are not across this story, let me just share the full details with you. Mr. Fulbrook was interviewed as a witness about an alleged bribery plot involving a Venezuelan banker who provided illegal campaign donations in Puerto Rico. It's a US Department of Justice investigation into someone called Julio Herrera Velutini, who owns a bank in the US-administered Caribbean island. In August, after he allegedly promised the island's governor, $300,000 in return for sacking the island's financial regulator. Ms. Truss said all staff being appointed by the government go through a proper process, and that is exactly what happened with Mark Fulbrook. You find out a little bit more detail about that if you want to. But those are the bones of the story, and Paul, I think, raises a valid point. But I've done an hour on trickle-down economics and an hour on the Donbass, so I am having a bit of fun in the shallow end now, which is quite appropriate because the caller after Philip in Cardiff will be Mandy in Bath. It is 35 minutes after 12 and Philip in Cardiff is next. Philip, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
My name actually isn't Philip, but I thought it might be amusing to call in as Philip. And also, I did want to keep my anonymity. You actually mentioned me at the top of your show yesterday. I am the heckler that spoke to Charles last Friday. And I thought I'd call in.
You didn't get arrested, did you?
No,
oh,
I'm calling you from the comfort of my own home.
No, good. I'm just checking, because some of the people that have caused disruptions at royal gatherings are, of course, facing charges. I'm sure the producer would have checked with you anyway. But what heckle did you do? It's not going to upset my listeners, is it? Just remind me.
while we struggle to afford to heat our homes, we have to pay for your parade.
Oh,
and there was some more after that. But that was the key
I did
part.
mention that at the top of it. I forgot about. So this was when we had a conversation about republicanism.
Yes, I couldn't call in yesterday because I wasn't listening live, so I didn't hear you mention it.
There you go. There's a lesson there for everybody, Philip. If you're not listening live, it could be the day when I talk explicitly about you. Exactly, that is the risk you take. The risk you take when you're not tuning. I wonder if Philip and Holly are listening today. They could ring in. I've said it already. Straight to the front of the queue. Go on, Philip. Where were we? Philip, not Philip.
Well, I was going to say, this is a bit of and I appreciate your dive into the shallow end. We all need that from time to time. But this is, a rag, front page, cliche, sensationalist piece of news, bit of clickbait for the online viewers to tell papers. It's not an important issue. There are far more important things we need to be talking about. And quite frankly, it is hilariously ironic and sort of hypocritical for people to be up in arms about others having greater privilege and unfair privilege than they, to get to jump the queue and have an unfair advantage when they're there to queue to see the most privileged person that exists.
That bit of it, I completely agree with you. I mean, that bit of it there is why we're actually talking about it. We're talking about the irony rather than necessarily the outrage. Although, no, that's not true either, because I think you're right and wrong. People are genuinely outraged. The newspapers are. I mean, it is chicken and egg. What comes first? The tabloid, the manufactured tabloid fury, or the actual outrage of the readers? And on this occasion, I think the outrage of the punters came before the outrage of the tabloid, not least because today's Tuesday, and they would never have appeared on the front page on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday for obvious reasons. You only just squeaked into the I newspaper, I think it was, because they wanted a little bit of balance for all the pageantry and ceremony.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, but that's really all I called in to say on this matter is that. I appreciate the dive into the shallow end, but it's just one of those things.
Of course it is. Hey, which is why we've called it the shallow end. But I'm glad you were listening. And you, actually, we got a little bit of snark from Republic yesterday on social media for not inviting people. And I pointed out it's a flipping phone-in show. If you want to contribute to the programme, then just ring 0345606. So when you bump into your mates from Republic, just talk them through how to operate a phone, will you? So that if they do want to join in a conversation we're having on the radio, they'll be able to.
And make sure to listen.
That's the crucial bit. Thank you. Take care. Whatever your name is. Mystery Heckler. I think his name was it in the paper? I can't remember. But anyway. Mandy's in Bath. The first woman on the programme, Mandy. What happened?
Good morning, Joe.
Hello.
Good afternoon, even. Good afternoon.
Exactly. It's practically evening. This is like my teenage years all over again. Not a woman in sight. It's unbelievable.
No, it really is. It really is afternoon. Thank you for taking the call.
Very welcome.
I queued for 12 hours with my son. My 19-year-old son was compelled. He wanted to go.
Oh, lovely.
We travelled up to London Friday evening. Yeah. We got there at 6 and we got in to see the Queen at 6. And I was saying to your researcher, the roller coaster of emotions that we went through on that 12 hours, I actually feel quite sorry for Holly and Philip that they haven't experienced that.
Yes.
That's how I feel. I'm not angry with them. If you want to go to the front of the queue, if you're in that position, absolutely crack on, get on with it. But having experienced it for myself and my son, and he was like, Mum, thank you so much for taking me.
Oh, what a beautiful story. Because we think that, I think books are going to be written about the queue in years to come, but the idea of a queue as being a means to an end, it is a liminal space through which we pass to get from A to B. You've just dismantled that idea. The queue was an end in itself. The queue had a point. The queue had a purpose. The queue itself had a role.
Yeah.
And you really enjoyed being in it.
Absolutely. It was, don't get me wrong, it was really tough at times.
I'm sure.
It was one of those, and I've got a 9-year-old daughter who desperately wanted to come. I'm like, love, there is no chance, not a chance now. Am I going to sit with you wide awake through the night, one step at a very, very slow step at a time? And my 70-year-old mother was like, I'm just not up for that. My health just won't take it. But she wanted to go. But, me and my son went and flew the flag for the family, and absolutely, I feel privileged to have been able to be one of the very few, given the number of people in the world that wanted to go, to be able to go.
Now, right, I'm going to level with you, Mandy.
Go on.
My switchboard has just gone down. So I had a full screen of people waiting to talk about this issue. And the switchboard, I've just been told, has gone down. My producer has written on the screen, we're having a tech issue with the switchboard. Please, Phil. Now, I thought I thought that I would level with you about that, just in case you thought that my normal quality of questioning and conversation was declining with every passing minute of this exchange. So I'm pretty close to saying, did you have any nice snacks in the queue or something like that?
To be fair, we had plenty of snacks. And that's the other thing that was lovely. People were sharing their snacks in the queue. Gosh. People were playing games in the queue. We had a lady and her daughter behind us were doing the ABC game. So going through the whole of the alphabet, can you think of an animal?
Yeah.
It's just little
I do that when I've got
that.
insomnia, actually.
Yeah, and the police officers going up and down on their push bikes, cheering everybody on. Keep going. You guys are doing so well. We're all really proud of you. There was so much love in that queue. Perfect. It was amazing.
And final question is: do you have a crack at explaining why other people are angry with Holly Willoughby and Phil?
Because they got nothing better to do.
Please, Phil.
Because they got nothing better to moan about. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's always something. There's always something.
Or maybe there's that element of, why couldn't I get in there? Why couldn't I get in?
I think that's part of it.
Why not me?
Yeah. That idea that if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for those pesky kids, I could have got into it myself. Thank you, Mandy. Thank you for accompanying me as I attempt to cover up and camouflage the fact that my switchboard is broken and nobody knows why. Never do the faces of my colleagues look blanker than when I look up in the middle of a broken switchboard. That's because they're focused and committed and concentrating on trying to get things up and running. Also, I believe I said it was Tuesday, so this hour's going really well. Oh, Lord, things must be serious. The engineering department has just arrived. 0345 6060 973 is the number you normally need to get in contact with this programme, but as things stand at the moment, it won't work. Apparently, I said it was Tuesday. I'm delighted to inform you that it is actually Wednesday. And the reason I thought it was Tuesday is, of course, because I didn't work on Monday. I worked on Friday, and I touched on something that Mandy just reminded me of. And I'm glad that she explained to us the beauty of the queue, because the queue was deliberate. And depending on which end you come at it from, it's either a positive or a negative. So a deliberate attempt to have this sort of medieval progress snaking through the city because it enforces the majesty and magic of monarchy can be seen either positively or negatively. But if you are in it and you are loving it, then it is an exclusively positive experience, I think. 12:43 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the phone-in nature of this programme has been somewhat compromised by the technology available to me, but we will rectify that moment in a minute. And we're also going to catch up with a Ukrainian journalist, Ukrainian MP, Kira Rudik, who joined us in the studio not long ago. We'll do that after the next advert break. But before we go to that, I'll tell you about the stories that we haven't talked about on the programme that I had cut out of the newspapers today in preparation for possibly talking about on the programme. And one of them, oddly, was that story about Liz Truss's chief of staff cooperating with the FBI over an investigation into a Conservative Party donor. This one here I'd cut out. The ITV presenters Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield have admitted that they understand why people felt so angry. Well, I don't, oddly enough, which is why we were doing it as a topic. And the harmful content story on the internet, which inevitably is back in the news. The fear that ministers are preparing to scrap controversial plans that would force social media firms to take down legal but harmful content on their platforms is something that we probably should talk about sooner rather than later. But I'm not going to mislead you. When I turn to the details of Molly Russell's inquest, I can't talk about it. So I mean, I've been doing this job for a long time, and we've done some harrowing stuff together, some big stories, but some of them just get you. They really do. And Molly, the 14-year-old from Harrow, who just a trigger warning, I suppose, on this one, who killed herself after viewing graphic content online, is set to open today, that inquest. And the details of the story just break my heart. They break me. And that's why I don't think we'll be talking about that. But I'm sure colleagues will be able to muster up a little bit more robustness than I can manage for that story and talk you through it, because it is extremely important. Helen makes a point. Golly, us women just can't catch a break. No callers at all to Mr. James OB for the first 2 hours, and then one finally gets on and the whole system breaks. You're not wrong. It's 12:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We return our attentions now to events in Russia this morning, namely that remarkable speech by the President Vladimir Putin, and some of the language involved being close to apocalyptic, certainly deserving of the description unprecedented. Kira Rudik is a Ukrainian MP who we've had the pleasure of meeting in person, actually, also leader of the Golos party, and she joins me via video link now. I just start by asking Kira what you made of that speech. There's a sense that he had to do something, three choices perhaps, given the recent Ukrainian gains and advances. Either he ignores it, he seeks to negotiate something, or he escalates, and he appears to have gone for the final option. He is escalating.
Hi, good morning, James.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. You see, first I was saying, look at this. The person who said that he will conquer us in 3 days right now is announcing mobilization for protect his territory. We probably did something right, but there are a couple of points important here. First, for everybody who was saying that Putin wants peace, I think it's very clear right now that he does not. The person who wants peace does not announce mobilization, does not threat the world with the nuclears, and does not say that he will go as far as needed to go with his plan, right? So for Erdogan, for Macron, and for everybody else who was saying, yeah, he's just a good guy, you need to figure out how to deal with him, we don't even have to say anything. We say, listen to what he said.
Yes.
I think what is important right now, that there will be a huge change in how Russian nation will feel the war. Because beforehand, it was a war somewhere that Russia used to do, like in Georgia, in Moldova, in Ukraine. And right now it will touch everybody. So it's their own sons who will have to go and die in Ukraine. And I can promise that they will die in Ukraine. And I think we can anticipate people not being happy about that. We can anticipate people finally getting on a protest, people leaving the country, people saying, whoa, it's too close to us. And if there was a way of actually mobilize Russians against the war, I think that would be it.
Because however good your propaganda is, if your son or your brother or your husband is going to Ukraine and not coming back, then the propaganda will not work.
Absolutely. And if you already called to go somewhere, so it means that the regular army is not enough, then you ask, and where is the regular army? You told us that we were invincible. You told us that we are the strongest nation in the world. You told us that that Ukraine is not a nation and it will be destroyed in a couple of days. What is going on? Question mark, question mark, question mark. And I like those question marks because it's right now on every single Russian to ask those questions.
Let's look at option two. So you talk about him clearly not wanting peace, and you mentioned Emmanuel Macron, who talked about giving him wiggle room or giving him room to back down. You correctly describe him as having sort of dismantled that position. He has elected to escalate. Why could he not just do nothing? Why could he just not leave things as they were and hope that things might get better for Russian forces in Ukraine?
I think this hope has no background, because we are not going to allow anything good to happen to Russian forces.
So he's frightened of what would happen next if he didn't do something now.
Absolutely. So he's basically trying to survive right now. And I like it because it means that he is in despair. You have seen his speech. You have seen him. Is this the person who is sane or wants peace? I think this is the person that clearly wants to make something of a really bad situation. We will not stop getting the support from our allies. We know it. It's very clear. We know that we will keep fighting him and we will keep pushing him back. So for him that his only thing that he was selling to Russian people was, maybe we live poorly, but everybody respects us.
Right.
Right now, it's clear that nobody respects them. And right now, it's clear that the situation is shocking. So I want this shock of things being not that they were told to for such a long time, be right now stressful to every single Russian family, to every single Russian, because that would make them go and protest. That will make them overthrow Putin. I do truly believe that it was the beginning of his end.
Some analysis I've read tallies with that. Some of it, of course, doesn't. Some of it goes in the opposite direction. And you mentioned Western support. When these referendums are complete, these bogus referendums that he's calling in the relevant regions, and he can then claim, albeit falsely, that it is Russian territory that Ukrainian forces are on, Russian soil, post-referendum, then the presence of NATO support on Russian soil perhaps becomes something he can use for his own purposes.
Well, he will do it anyways, and I right now think it is very clear. Forgive me, we have been saying this since the beginning of the war, that this is what he wants, like a full-scale war with NATO. And we were saying, guys, we are fighting our mutual fight. Well, this is what we are doing, and we will keep doing that. We are doing everything possible and impossible to stop those referendums. But again, I think before we move to the next step, like what to do next, I think today and tomorrow are super important for everybody just to digest this thought. Putin doesn't want peace. Just live with this, and then start talking with us of what to do next. Because I cannot begin to tell you how many times and energy we had to spend on just persuading people that there is no negotiations with Putin, etc. And how many world leaders were just still living in this illusion, hoping that, things will resolve themselves. They will not. This
has clearly been enormously frustrating to you personally, Kira. I can tell by the way that you're speaking, this almost the generosity, for want of a better word, the naivety of thinking that, if he does this and does that, then will be the time to sit around the negotiating table, when really they're treating Ukrainian people like pawns in their own contemplations.
Yeah. For us, we have been in this war for 8 years. Yeah. So all the lessons that we need to learn about Russia, we already learned. Like that they do not keep their word, that Putin wants to take all of Ukraine and not just some parts, that he will not stop because he has his plan, that for him it's the only way to keep in power, to continue on this war. And for the last 7 months, it was just terrifying and painful, persuading everybody in everything that we already know. And we're doing it like winning time for this to be settled in people's minds. But I guess it is what it is. We will continue doing what we are doing. But
Vladimir Putin keeps proving your point for you in some ways, which is oddly helpful. My final question, on a slightly more upbeat note, perhaps, is just your understanding of why the recent gains, the recent advances by Ukrainian forces have been so successful and have taken everybody by surprise.
There is a good answer to that. Because we are fighting for our own territory, because we are fighting to liberate our own people, our motherland. Because in the morning when Ukrainian soldier is waking up, he is praying to God and he is saying, today I will go and fight. I will free somebody's mother, somebody's sister. I will free our land, and if I have to die for it, I will die. So help me God. And Russian soldier is waking up and saying, I'm in the middle of nowhere, protecting some administrative building. Am I going to die for it?
You're right.
And they're done.
That was a pretty powerful answer. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Kira Rudik, a Ukrainian MP and the leader of the Golos party, speaking to us. And do take care of yourself as well. Thank you. And I think I'll leave you with those words once again that come from my very rudimentary Greek, but they do sum up precisely what Kira Rudik just described, and something that was screamed by partisans across Greek islands and mainlands during various periods of occupation. Eleftheria I thanatos, which simply translates as freedom or death. And my God, it's incredible to see somebody describing that from the perspective of being in the middle of it rather than history books and fiction, which is where I first came across that incredibly powerful phrase. That's it from me for another day. Apologies to everyone waiting to talk about Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. I have a suspicion Sheila Fogarty won't be returning to that territory. But if
no, but I have strong views on it, which are that it's ludicrous that they are being shamed in this way, and it's ludicrous that they are in any danger of losing their jobs. I mean, we've gone mad.
I felt that.
If somebody had said to me in the middle of last week, here's a parliamentary pass, you can use it to see it, I would have done it.
Would you?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I think I probably
But I wouldn't
would
have queued for 12 hours just because it didn't matter to me that much. But if a journalist said, here's a pass, I'd have gone, I'd have observed, and I'd have reported back.
And it would have improved the quality. Not that it's possible to improve the quality of your broadcasting, but it would have.
It's ludicrous.
Well, as I've said it before, and I'll say it again, if you're listening, Phil and Holly, do ring in and put your side of the story, because you can go straight to the front of the queue.
And I'll talk to you. I know it's mad when you think, just the interview you've just done there, when you think about the things in the world that truly matter, and that isn't one of them, 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 and that isn't one of them.